If you love liberty, declare your independence by signing the Shire Society Declaration at shiresociety.com.
Relative to a jury trial for execution of a tax lien. And I recognize Representative Marple as the sponsor. And welcome back to the Judiciary Committee, Representative Marple.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the jury. Members of the committee.
We're a super jury. So.
Yeah. I'm here today to bring forth my advocacy of this bill here, 195, as more or less just a, let's call it, a house cleaning endeavor. Article 20 of our Constitution's Bill of Rights is extremely explicit. And in it, it protects the people in their right to a trial by jury whenever, and that's an error here that I see that the committee might want to strike out. If you see in line 7, it starts, quote, the individual property owner, comma. And here's what I think should be stricken. If the amount of tax liability in dispute exceeds $1,500, comma. Now the reason that I say I believe the committee should remove that is because the Constitution in Article 20 does not limit it to those numbers. And the reason it doesn't is because it says property. So if you're dealing with property, regardless of the value, this is real estate. If you read Article 20 and it is accepted as written, then this is nothing more than to remove a action that is being taken now that is in controversy with Article 20. Many of the so-called tax deeds are being issued without a jury trial. And so they're unlawful. They should be unlawful. And so this is an effort to have the tax deed, if one is issued, brought before a jury so the jury knows the full consequences of what is being presented and why. In other words, today nobody knows what is happening. Anyway, that's about what it amounts to. It's house cleaning. It's either a question of obeying what Article 20 says or disregarding Article 20. In my opinion, that would be a violation of your oath of office because Article 20 says it all. And I said 3 to 5. I'm going to limit it there unless there's some questions. And I don't know how we can question Article 20.
Representative Marple, will you take questions?
Pardon me?
Will you take questions?
I'm really more than happy to.
Representative Rular.
Thank you for coming and thank you for
I thank you for the question.
My question is actually on line 9. Line 9 of the bill says a demand for a jury trial may be filed in writing, and this is the issue I have, at any time. My question to that is, you cannot claim currently under court rules a right to a jury trial at any time during the litigation. It has to be in the beginning of the litigation or you waive that right. That language has nothing to do with the Constitution or the $1,500. It has to do with the timing of being able to claim a trial by jury.
Excuse me, you said it has to do with what?
The timing of the right to claim a trial by jury.
Well, I would conflict with you on that because you're talking about a rule or a regulation. And rules and regulations do not pertain to a sovereign. We're talking about sovereign inhabitants. Article 30 of Part 2, I beg your pardon, defines us as inhabitants. We are sovereign American inhabitants. We are not corporate slaves. And that's what the difference is here. We have a corporation, which is a fiction. In fact, I happen to be on the board of directors of one of the biggest corporations, and that's the state of New Hampshire. I'm nothing more than one member on the board of directors, which has 400 board of directors, plus 24 in the Senate. But we're elected officials. We're not corporate employees. And you're talking about rules and regulations for corporate employees, not we, the sovereigns.
Thank you, and follow up, Representative Goulart, and then Representative Horry.
My follow-up to that would be, the courts have set rules that we, the legislative body, have allowed them to do, whether we like them or not. They are rules. This particular sentence appears to me to say that any time, to include after a verdict has come down, and then you decide you want to file a trial by jury. I don't think that that is what the intent of Article 20 is.
Well, I'm not going to contest what your reading of Article 20 is. The rest of the committee can read it and determine for their own what the intent of Article 20 is. My contention with your assessment is that rules and regulations do not have to be obeyed by sovereigns. This here is, because many of them won't even know what had taken place. And that's why it says what it says at any time, before or after, because you're dealing with something that is now fraud. F-R-A-U-D. And fraud, there's no statute of limitations on fraud.
Thank you, Representative. Do you have a question, Representative Horry?
Yeah. I guess the first question is, and this is not in the section of the RSA that plays a property tax, but the first few paragraphs about something called the residence tax. So like, I'm wondering what, I'm actually ashamed to say I'm ignorant. I'm not sure exactly what that is. I thought the poll tax was abolished years ago. But the second question is related to that. This does apply only to individual taxpayers. So
Answer the first question.
okay, yeah. Oh yeah.
Ask get the answer.
Okay.
Okay. Remember, you're here to ask questions.
Yes.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So what does could you explain what the resident tax is that this applies to?
Can you rephrase it or speak louder, please?
Okay, I'll try to do both. This is in the section about something called the residence tax, which sounds like the poll tax, but I thought, so how does that differ from the property tax?
Those were outlawed.
Follow up.
Not surprised here. The second question is, so this protection, this jury trial, this applies only to, by individuals, you mean it's not available to corporations, so like if LLCs and corporations would not be able to ask for a jury trial, just a natural person, a human being, an inhabitant, is that what this says?
Let me put it this way. I think that the Article 20 is extremely explicit. It calls it a sacred right. I think that puts the emphasis on a sacred right to a trial by jury. Those are pretty powerful words. So I really don't see what you're contending.
Follow up.
I just want to make sure that this right to a jury trial is this limited to just what they call like natural persons or human beings, so us, not the corporate fictions?
Well, you use the term person, is that correct?
Yes.
Well, the term person's a corporation.
Oh, okay.
Or that's the way it's been defined, as I believe I'm correct.
Representative Welper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative, for taking my question. So the first part of my question, I guess my first question, has to do with the bill says that any law providing for collection of a tax through a lien on property, is that, I'm not understanding what the property owner would be disputing to be asking for a jury trial under this language. What is it exactly that somebody would want to invoke this for?
It's the protection of the people's property under Article 20. Government, being a fiction, a corporate fiction, has no authority to do anything with the inhabitants, that's what we are, inhabitants, unless it has been given that by the Constitution. Article 8 is extremely important because it says all power residing originally in the people. All the magistrates and officers of government are the substitutes and agents, and at all times accountable to them. They're not being accountable if they're depriving them of their constitutional right to a trial by jury.
Follow up.
I'm absolutely in agreement with you.
Pardon me?
My question is, my town has property taxes. They send out, they go through a legal process, they generate the tax bills, they send them out. I have the opportunity to dispute my assessment, the way they allocate the taxes to my house. Those I already have. What is it that I could add, that this would add to my ability now? What can I do with this past that I can't do now?
Well, you could read Article 12, I guess, because Article 12 states very much that it's reciprocity between, without quid pro quo. If the people don't get this, then the government doesn't get that. That's what we're talking about.
I can read the Constitution.
Do you have a follow-up question, Representative Welcome?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I don't.
Please complete your thought, Representative Marple.
Well, I think it boils down to just exactly what I started out with. We're either going to obey the Constitution or we're not. That's what you guys got to decide. Not, well, anyway, I'm sorry about that.
Representative Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to be clear, you don't want any statute of limitation applying to this?
There can't be. Because otherwise you would be protecting what is now a fraud.
And you believe fraud has no statute of limitations?
It doesn't, to my knowledge. I welcome any evidence to show that it has as far as the stare decisis is concerned. There is, and it was mentioned before, and I learned this from legislative services many years ago. I'm a fifth-term rep here from Merrimack's 24. So I've been around a few years and I try to learn and absorb some of the knowledge that is available. The legislative services told me that when they're crafting this, and that's why I see that problem there in line 7 and 8, that there is a maxim of law, which I'll give you the Latin as I understand it. Inclusio unis, est exclusio alternus. And what that Latin translates to is very simply, that which is included absolutely excludes all else. So if it doesn't appear black on white within the four corners, then it isn't there. So you can't read into a piece of legislation or a statute that's written something that isn't there.
Thank you, sir.
And that's what, I guess, does that answer your question? Or?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Hopper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Representative Marple for taking my question. And I don't know the answer to this, so that's why I'm asking, is, so the town of Ware, I don't pay my taxes, the town of Ware puts a lien on my property. That would allow, this bill, if passed, would allow me a trial by jury.
That's correct.
The only the question I have is, if I ask for a trial by jury, does that cost my town any additional money to allow that to be taken to trial?
Well, I would suggest that the town officials take a good look at that, because if it's going to cost them, then perhaps they will do what they're supposed to do and change the manner in which the assessment is made. In other words, if they've made an assessment that isn't consistent with what your consent would be under Article 12, requires your consent to agree with the assessment. And if you don't agree with the assessment, and exercise your right here, you let the jury decide whether the assessment is a proper assessment. But that's something that would be a decision made by the municipal authorities in the fiction known as the town of Ware.
Follow up?
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The reason I'm asking that is that it's also the case in 28A of the Constitution that we as a body cannot impose a law that is going to cost my town money unless the state is willing to pay for it. So shouldn't there be an amendment to this that any cost incurred will be provided by the state?
Well, go then. Does it say that in Article 20?
It says it in 28A.
Well, 28A is not what we're addressing here. We're addressing Article 20. You can't configure the tools together because you're merging something. There's no merger. You're talking about a single issue here, which is Article 20, which requires a trial by jury. And if you're going to deny, this is extraneous what you're suggesting, because it doesn't pertain to Article 20. You confine, as I just said, inclusio unis est exclusione. If it's not here, it doesn't exist. That's exactly how you read all of your constitutional mandates and prohibitions. There's prohibitions. And the prohibitions are very clear. If you want to get real detailed in here, you can't pay your bills today. You can discharge them, but you can't pay them, because in 1966, Lyndon Baines Johnson took the last remaining lawful, not legal, lawful consideration of gold and silver coin as mandated. It's mandated in Article 1, Section 10. No state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debt, or also impair the obligation of contracts. That's a constitutional right, which is mandated by the Supremacy Clause. And the Supremacy Clause is Article 6, Part 2 of our Constitution, which says exclusively, this Constitution, all laws made pursuant to this Constitution, and all treaties shall be made by the supreme law of the land. The second mandate says, quote, the judges in every state are bound thereby, unquote. But the most important one, Gary, is this. That's the third mandate in Article 6. And it says, quote, anything in the constitutional laws of the several states which is contrary, it's notwithstanding. So a lot of what goes on here is in total violation of our rights and privileges, or should we say, under the federal Constitution. And they slip right by it because most people, they just don't care. I care. And Article 20 is what I am here to support and see that my constituents have that right. A trial by jury. Thank you.
Representative.
Yes, thank you very much for answering everybody's question. And okay, I have a basic question, which, okay, so the way I understand it is that somebody in the position of the example that Representative Hopper gave would not have a right to a jury trial unless we pass this. Is that correct?
Well, let me put it this way. As I understand it, Article 20 is the supreme law of the land, and it guarantees a right of trial by jury, and that is what is not occurring now. This here is to sort of tweak the rules and regulations, which is the public policy that we establish. We don't make law. The Constitution is the law. Article 20 is the law. All we can do is submit what appears to be statutes. Statutes are nothing more than public policy, which is the majority rule to have a little order and regular, coming to order agreement with the people. We don't make law, we make statutes.
Thank you very much.
Does that answer your question?
Follow up?
Well, I guess I am a little concerned that if I said, that I wanted a jury trial, because of the example that Representative Marple gave, somebody could say that they would have any basis for saying, no, I couldn't have that jury trial. I mean, the people, somebody must know something about Article 20. And, I mean, so you're telling me that if I insisted that I have a jury trial, that there wouldn't be anybody that would go back to Article 20 and say, oh, she has a right to that?
Well, if you don't, you say authority, nobody has any more authority than you, because you have the power. That's where Article 8 comes in. It says, all power residing originally in you, the people. You have the power to interpret what Article 20 says. You don't rely on anybody else except your own conscience. So you will answer that question at the bar of your own conscience as to whether you want one or you're entitled to one, or whether you want to pursue it. That's your decision. But you don't look to anyone for authority. You are a sovereign. You're not a subject. That's subject that was severed with the Revolution, and the King of England does not have any feudal control in this state or any other state. The feudal ties with Great Britain were severed with the Revolution. We are sovereigns without subjects. Exercise your sovereignty.
I think we've reached a limit on this discussion. Thank you, Representative Marple.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the community, please answer this at the bar of your own conscience.
We have 4 additional pink cards and we have 5 minutes. I recognize Ms. Carolyn Ward of the Department of Revenue, who says 5 minutes. If you can move it ahead, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Carolyn Ward. I work with the Department of Revenue doing legislative work. The department doesn't take a position on this bill. I think generally the Constitution stands on its own. I'm really just available if you have any questions about the department's practices as it relates to jury trials and liening property. We wanted to make sure we were present to answer any questions if you have them.
Representative Ullery?
Okay. Is it the usual practice of the Department of Revenue or any of the towns of which you know for them to take property by title lien without a trial by jury being offered or being responded to when requested by the property owner?
I can't speak to what the towns do, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to well answer your question, because I can say that the department, although we do take liens out on folks' property, we generally aren't executing. We don't foreclose on people's property once we leave them. I've been with the department for roughly 5 years, and I can't think of a single instance of when we have actually foreclosed on someone's property for purposes of collecting a tax. We're generally just placing the lien to protect our interests.
Follow-up, Representative.
Real quick follow-up on this. To your knowledge, has this been the usual and customary practice of the Department of Revenue from the inception of the province of New Hampshire?
I can't speak that far back, but you know, a survey amongst the folks who are currently there now, we would not contest a jury trial if someone wanted one, but we're just generally not ever executing liens.
You satisfied?
Thank you. Thank you.
Any additional questions at this point? Seeing none, thank you very much. Mr. Howard, I recognize Mr. Howard Zibble. Information only, 2 minutes. And thank you, Mr. Zibble.
Good morning again, members of the committee. Howard Zibble, General Counsel to the Supreme Court. Actually, I'm supposed to introduce myself as a legislative liaison, since I'm only part-time now and just doing legislative work. There's a good reason why there's no right to a jury trial under Part 1, Article 20 in tax cases. And that is a case decided by the Supreme Court some 25 years ago, almost 35 years ago. State versus Morrow. You'll find that at 123 New Hampshire
707, decided in 1983. That decision construed Part 1, Article 20 of the Constitution as granting a right to a jury trial in all cases in which that right existed in 1784 when Part 1, Article 20 was adopted. So if there was no right to a jury trial on a particular subject matter in 1784, there's no Part 1, Article 20 right to a jury trial today. And I don't believe, I have not researched the question, but I don't think the tax lien process was substantially in place in 1784. It's probably not in place at all. Therefore, there'd be no right to a jury trial. That doesn't mean that you can't extend that right, but it is not constitutionally mandated. And if you extended that right, then you get into Representative Harper's question about mandates, and extending that right could potentially be very expensive to towns, not only to towns, but also to the judicial branch. I don't know how many people would avail themselves of the right if you were to grant it, but it could be pretty expensive.
Representative Oliver?
A quick question, sir. You're in 123.707. Would that be based upon the section in Article 20 which says, except those in which another practice is and has been customary?
I know I didn't go back and read the case. I did copy it, but I didn't read it in full, just to make sure it's holding with what the annotations in the RSA says. So I'd have to say, you'd have to read the case.
All right, thank you.
Any additional questions? Representative Hopper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it possible for you to email us a link to that case or something?
Yeah, I will do that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay to use the all members? I will do so.
Any additional questions? Again, thank you, Mr. Zibel. We're approaching 11 o'clock. We have two pink cards. I'm going to recognize Mr. Is it Jace? Jakey. Mr. Michael Jakey of the New Hampshire Tax Collectors.
That's correct. I'm the tax collector treasurer for the city of Concord, here representing the New Hampshire Tax Collectors Association. And we oppose this bill as it would be very costly to, the cities and towns. In Concord, we lien probably 500 to 600 properties a year. And I would say at least 50% of those properties owe over $1,500. I talked to the tax collector at the city of Nashua this morning, who indicated they lien probably 700 to 800, and 75% of those are over $1,500. So just looking at and talking to our city attorney at the city of Concord, that this would be very costly for them. I mean, probably having to add extra staff or outsource if we have to go to a jury trial on these liens. And I'll take any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Okay, go ahead, Representative.
Quick question. When notice of a lien is provided, is that a positive notice of lien, or is it just walk over across the street and file it and say the hell with it?
No, in Chapter 80 of the RSAs, it is outlined in there, and those have to go out certified mail. Return receipt requested.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Sir, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
Can you walk us briefly through the process, the stages of the process, including appeals, and what rights are? Go ahead.
As far as the tax lien, once the tax year ends, we go ahead and we place a lien. First, we have to send out a certified notice, give people 30 days to come in and pay that lien. If they don't pay it, we execute a lien with the Merrimack County Registry of Deeds. Then 2 years and a day from the date that we place that lien, the city has the right to take the property by a tax deed if it's not paid. And in Concord, I'd say typically on average, we probably tax deed one property a year. It's typically a vacant property that nobody's living in. And we work out payment arrangements with people that have liens and work with them. And if they have a mortgage, a lot of times a mortgage company will come in and pay that lien to protect their interest. And when we look at it, if we're gonna have a jury on for a lien, if a mortgage company's gonna foreclose on a mortgage, shouldn't the person have a right to a jury for that as well?
Representative Hunt.
Thank you. So is there no process to even contest a lien?
Somebody can come in and ask, about the lien and talk to their tax collector. And if we tax deed a property under chapter 8039, they have 10 years from the date that a tax deed is taken, property is taken by a tax deed, to contest the validity of that tax deed in chapter 8039. So somebody has their property taken, they have 10 years to go back and contest the validity of that tax deed.
Follow up, Representative.
Are they
Hunt.
contesting it with the people who impose the tax, or does some court have jurisdiction over this?
I'm not sure if there's any court, that has jurisdiction, I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Thank you, sir. Our last pink card, Mr. Ian Freeman.
Thank you.
Of Keene, New Hampshire, representing the New Hampshire Library.
No, New Hampshire Liberty Party.
Oh, the Liberty.
I'm also one of the board of directors of the New Hampshire Jury, nhjury.com is a jury rights group here, and so I support this bill. Ultimately, I don't think it goes far enough. What we need to have is a full expansion of jury rights here in New Hampshire. If people are charged with a Class B misdemeanor, for instance, they don't get a jury trial, and the supposed reason for that is because, well, there's no jail time associated with that. But ultimately, if they don't pay the fine, they will go to jail. So I'd like to see full jury rights across all charges in New Hampshire. But to answer Representative Walter, I believe it, your question earlier, you asked why would people want this, if they were going through this process. Because right now, as Representative Hines suggested, the only thing you can do with these tax liens is go and talk to the county or the city or the town that's taking the property. So you have no other authority to which you can appeal to. And having a jury trial would make it so that our peers have the ability to judge a case rather than a taxing authority, which obviously is going to rule in favor of the city every single time. So this gives, the jury historically has supposed to have been the fourth and the final check and balance on the government. So, we know about the different branches of government and how they're supposed to check one another. But in the event of a completely out of control government or a completely corrupt city council, having the people being able to have a say on what those folks do, beyond just being able to, go to an election 2 years later. So that's the only level of control we have over city councils or town councils right now, it's just the election. But this would give a jury of 12 the opportunity to weigh in on what it is that a corrupt town council does. And we absolutely do have corruption here in New Hampshire. A perfect example, briefly, would have been in the town of Keene, where I'm from. They brought this Bearcat, this police vehicle, in, and 90% of the people in Keene, Republicans, Democrats, everybody was against this thing. But the city council went ahead and voted for it because that's what the police department wanted. So it's pretty clear that there is a division between what the people might want and what the town council or the city council wants. This gives somebody who's being threatened, their home is being threatened and possibly being taken from them. This gives them at least some avenue of being able to challenge that and have the people in the town say, you know what, that's not fair what they're doing to that guy. Let's stop this thing in its tracks. So I hope that better answers your question from earlier. In towns, I think the Revenue Administration lady said that nobody had, or nobody in her office had executed taking of a property. Well, it certainly happens at the town level. I mean, maybe it's not very often, but it definitely does. So I would encourage you guys to vote for this. It expands jury rights, and the more jury trials we can have, the better checks and balances we'll have against an out-of-control government. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Will you take questions?
Oh, certainly.
Are there any questions for this witness? Seeing none, I close the hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like another bite at the apple, just 30 seconds. They're both constitutional. The Fifth Amendment absolutely deprives government of taking property without compensation. So we have a constitutional issue. also under the Fifth Amendment. And then we have another constitutional issue, and that is the Seventh Amendment. And the Seventh Amendment guarantees a right, that's under the common law, guarantees a right of trial by jury on anything in excess of $20. So those are two constitutional issues which I would like you to consider in your deliberations before you pass this bill. Thank you very much. Did I take you to 30 seconds? Yeah.
I close the hearing on HB 292, and we will reconvene in 5 minutes.
We'd like to invite you to visit freekeen.com. Freekeen.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. Freekeen.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. Freekeen.com.
I should be in Keene, New Hampshire with the Free Staters.